Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners 18th Budget Work Session. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. And for those presenting today, please turn your mic on when you begin speaking and off when you've completed. Thank you. When you've completed your remarks. For all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. So we're going to start off today with a budget work session with DCHS. We were a little bit, we had a lot of information from that department. We had a separate preschool for all session because we ran out of time. So we want to make sure we have time to address questions. We thank the department for replying to the questions that were brought up at the last meeting, and this is our chance to have some in-person response to that. And then we are going to move over to a conversation around, to start a discussion about amendments. And I want to appreciate all the work that staff did to kind of group those and set us up for a positive conversation today. So we'll do that after we hear from DCHS. So good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair and County Commissioners. My name is Mohammed Bader. I'm the Director for the Department of County Human Services, and I use he, him pronouns. I want to thank you all for having us back together here. There were some questions that you all wanted us to follow up on. First one up, amazing. As an immigrant, I really appreciate you, Commissioner Singleton, and the rest of you, the board, for recognizing Immigrant and Refugee Month. It was amazing, and although I did not translate that proclamation, it just brought to mind that during this very difficult time, there was an amazing Arab American poet who was contemporary of Khalil Gibran. A lot of you heard of Khalil Gibran, but you probably never heard about Elia Abu Madi. Elia Abu Madi and Khalil Gibran created something, they called it the pen pals, basically. They wrote a lot of poetry in Boston. And Elia Abu Madi said, I'm going to read a couple notes for you and translate it. It says, قال الليالي جرعتني علقمة. He said, nights fed me poison. قلت ابتسم ولأن جرعت العلقمة. So I said, smile, even though you swallowed poison. فلعل غيرك رآك مرنما طرح الكآبة جانبا وترنما. So maybe somebody will see you smiling and they'll put aside their worries and smile. So I wanted to thank Commissioner Singleton. She came and sat next to me even though we were sparring yesterday, just like soccer. We both are soccer players, and we know like when what stays in the field stays in the field. We kind of push each other around, but then afterwards we shake each other's hands. With that, I just wanted to, before I pass it to my team, I wanted to say that there was some questions that were brought up by some of you as commissioners yesterday during the budget amendments, and there were questions about communications positions referenced in the community information specialist positions. I just wanted to draw your attention that those are these community information specialists. They are not communications per se, but they are the Aging and Disability Resource Connection Helpline. They are individuals who we decided to bring from 211 to bring services in-house, as we found out it would be more efficient and actually less costly for us as a program. We brought about 7 positions in fiscal year 26 to cover evenings, weekends, and holidays. Coverage for our 24-hour helpline was previously contracted, again, out to 211. Those are not communications positions. They are direct service frontline represented staff. Just wanted to say that maintaining these positions will allow us to continue providing responsive and timely service to both internal and external customers who contact ADVSD and Helpline. And as some of you, I worked for many years in that program. These individuals have actually access to our database system, so they're able, unlike 211, they would have to send us that information. These individuals, because they work for us, they are stationed with our teams, they're able to look at each client and provide seamless services to our clients. There's a few other positions. Now, there is some communications positions too, it's true. There's 2 communications positions in ADVSD, and one of them is 100% funded by Medicaid that focuses on adult care home program. As you know, there's about 600 adult foster home providers, and we need to communicate with those providers. So a lot of that communication around training them and around making sure that they're well equipped and understand their roles and responsibilities. The other position is a split 85% Medicaid and 15% county general funded position. And there's one position that I have for the whole department that is communication, that is 100% county general fund, but that position provides services for all of the department. And a lot of what you see in terms of budget, materials, all that stuff, that position also helps with it too. There was also a question about span of control. I'm happy to report that DCHS as a whole has a 1-to-10 ratio in terms of span of control. And with that, I think I maybe we'll go to the next slide if, you know. I don't have much more. I was given time limitations, so I want to just note that. So I am done with my portion, and I'll want to pass it to the rest of the team. There is like a little bit of a agenda here for us to follow, but I'm just going to turn it to the next person.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rachel Pearl, Deputy Director for DCHS, she, her pronouns. I'm going to pass it to Walter, who's first going to cover some of your questions about SUN, the SUN service system, and there's some other specific areas, I think, within SUN that you had questions, so we'll provide a brief overview and then time for questions for that.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Walter Rodriguez. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the program supervisor for the SUN service system. I'm starting off with this first slide as an overview of the SUN service system and also a visual to demonstrate the continuum of care that goes with the different programs and services within SUN. The SUN service system is an alignment of different programs and services that are intended to support families and youth. This system was launched in 2004 thanks to a board policy that was asking us to look at the different programs and services and making sure that different programs and services and focusing on children and youth and families and make sure that they were aligned and working together. And so this is where the creation of the SUN service system came from. As you can see on this slide, we have, we have a kind of a prenatal all the way to post-high school, because that is the range of support that is being provided to our families, to our youth, and to our families. We have SUN Community Schools on here to demonstrate as the anchor of the system. So SUN Community Schools are in our public schools and 92, 93 community schools and are providing an anchor support. So they are connecting families to these other programs and services. We have 3 key focus areas within the SUN service system. We have early learning supports, which are in yellow, as you can see there. We have family stability supports, so those are those wraparound services. And then we have youth and family advocacy, which is kind of in that middle to high school. And all of that has the program offers if there's more information and more details. But this is just to show how we're supporting families throughout the development of their child and as families grow as well.
Please go ahead.
I am trying to connect the lines and the changes. And I know that you were put in a difficult position with budget constraints about how to move forward with our SUN initiative while having to find budget changes. One of the things that I'm trying to understand is in what way has Successful Families program changed in this proposal, and what services are we unable to continue providing or at a reduced capacity due to these reductions?
Yeah, it's in a couple of slides, it speaks to the similarities between successful families and Sun Service System. The Sun Service System focuses on supporting families and youth. Successful Families also focuses on supporting families and youth. And so there is some alignment and some similarities that are happening between successful families and the Sun Service System. The biggest program that's in Successful Families, or the largest one, is that youth focus support, which is similar to our Sun Youth Advocacy Program. And so there is this similarities between these two that are providing services for youth, focusing on one-on-one case management, focusing on being able to provide the connection with youth and making sure that they're on track to graduate. That's happening within youth advocacy as well as the Successful Families program. Successful Families is focused in 2 districts, while our Sun Youth Advocacy is across all 6 of our school districts that we partner with. So there would be a reduction in services that are being provided, but there is some similarities that can continue within the Sun Service System. And that slide, I think we can, when we get to it, can go into it a little bit more.
Did you want to go to the next slide or
Yeah.
just wait? Okay.
So this next slide is talking about family resource navigators and how they're working to support families in that wraparound services. So family resource navigators are working alongside families to build skills and confidence while navigating systems of support that they need to access. And in fiscal year 26, family resource navigators will act as hubs within 6 of our school districts. So instead of being located, like in this fiscal year, family resource navigators were located in 60 Title I schools. So instead of being located there, they're going to be located in regional hubs or areas, primarily in our middle and high schools, to be able to access and to be able to support families on that regional district level. So all 6 of our school districts that have Sun Community School would have 1 or more family resource navigators. Our family resource navigators collaborate with our school districts. They work with staff, whether it's a counselor. We recognize that our school districts are experiencing cuts, so a lot of their social workers are actually being eliminated, and so family resource navigators are playing that role to be able to support families and getting them connected to resources, working with our schools, as well as working with Sun site managers, working with our different programs to connect families to those resources. Our goal for next year is making sure that our family resource navigators can guide families and help support them towards the new Medicaid 115 waiver program as well. They wouldn't be approving them as Medicaid, but they would let them know, hey, this is this resource you can access.
How would they access that, knowing that that has been nearly impossible for anyone to access? Are we going to be able to literally help navigate between them and either Trillium or Care Oregon?
Yeah, Commissioner, I'll take that question. So we are, as I talked about yesterday in the amendment conversation, that we are taking on a larger role to help with the process, the upfront process. We are working in negotiations right now to work on some upfront pieces to help set people up for eligibility and support in that. And then we will also be a provider on the other side when folks come out eligible. What's going to be helpful for us in this connection point in connecting family resource navigators to the Medicaid 1115 waiver team is having a better understanding of whether or not a family would be eligible for the waiver, better understanding of what their current situation is in regards to housing stability, and be able to connect them to the right resource. So if it's that they don't meet the clinical factors for the Medicaid 1115 waiver, that they would be connected to rent assistance through the pot of money that we would have. We also hope that through this new partnership and expansion of our role, that we'd be able to identify whether or not someone would be evicted while waiting for the eligibility process, and that we could help avoid that, because what we know about the waiver is it's connected to a landlord and an address. The second they lose that housing, they become ineligible for the waiver. So I think retaining that housing and helping to get them through that eligibility process is like a critical connection point between the school districts, the family resource navigators, the Sun Service System, and the Medicaid 1115 waiver team.
Go on to the next slide. One thing we wanted to highlight is that the focus of Family Resource Navigators is to support families at risk of homelessness by connecting them directly to rent assistance and eviction prevention services. Family Resource Navigators work differently from what HSD does with families. The family system at HSD serves homeless families. The Family Resource Navigators can support in providing referrals or connecting families to the shelter waitlist, but the core work of Family Resource Navigators will be to prevent families from becoming homeless to begin with by connecting them to these different resources and supports. This next series of slides, there's going to be, I think, 3 slides here that are talking about the Sun Service System wage equity effort. So we have seen over the last couple of years that the Sun Service System and Sun Community Schools have experienced high turnover. This high turnover has been impacting the ability to build relationships with families and students. It's been impacting our relationships with, or the relationship with community partners, our school districts, and the system instability is also impacting program quality. If we go on to the next slide, some of that is based off some of the research we've done or some of the feedback sessions that we did. So prior to this procurement, we did some stakeholder interviews, did surveys with families, our providers, and our school districts to gather information, and that's where we heard from them some of those challenges around the instability of the workforce. We also did a wage compensation study that was done because of our community-based organization advocating for increase in wages. So we partnered with DCM to do a wage compensation study just for the organizations that provide services in the Sun Service System. The results of the surveys from our community-based organizations and from families really highlighted, and it was demonstrated through what they wrote about high turnover and the impacts to high turnover. One example was families wrote, "I don't know who my site manager is anymore because I've had 3 in a year. My child can't participate in programming because the instructor left after the 2nd week to get a different position." And so we recognized that this needed to be addressed, and being able to address wages and the workforce stability was important. Also, on top of that, there was that compensation study that I spoke about. The main takeaway from the compensation study was that there was a wage gap of about 23 to 35% for salaries of Sun contracted agencies compared with our county staff in comparable positions. So it just highlighted that gap that was happening. And I know that in that compensation study, we were committed to looking at what can be done to not address the gap, but see what can be done to narrow it in some, or just make it a little smaller.
Yeah, I know, Commissioner, you asked us about that, so we're hoping that hopefully these will answer you, but if not, we can also have more conversation with you later.
And so
I think just because this is not just a DCHS issue, so I still want to come back to at some point, Chair, the how are we addressing this as a county, because we are, I think we talked about before when I was at the joint office, we were able to do this for just joint office providers, which meant folks who had contracts with DCHS had to choose to take it for just a part of their staff or not. And now I think we're in a similar position where some of your contractors will have contracts with other county departments that aren't able to do wage increases, and we're putting providers in a really impossible position.
So the way that we approached this addressing of wages was we realized there was a lack of additional resources. And we aren't just talking about county. We worked with the sponsors table, which is comprised of the city, the mayor's office, our superintendents, and the Multnomah County and the chair met regularly last year to figure out what can we do to address this. And we recognized our school districts don't have any additional funds, the city of Portland doesn't have additional funds, and we don't. So we had to look at utilizing the funds that we did have, where we could see some possible similarities or duplication. And that's where the approach to reallocating funds for successful families came from, is that there was similarity in the work. And so we wanted to make sure that we were reinforcing the strength of the Sun Service System to be able to deliver the services to families. One thing I wanted to note is that the $2.3 million that's being reallocated was placed in a single program offer in the budget. However, the way that we're reallocating or allocating those funds is that 1.3 million for wage increases are not going to just Sun Community Schools. That money is going for all of the Sun service system. So it includes increasing wages for our parent-child development services, our community schools, our Sun Youth Advocacy. So the increase in wages is across the Sun service system, not just in community schools. And then also there was around 900,000 that will be going towards Sun Youth Advocacy to support the youth and middle school, because we knew the impact of successful family reallocation. And so we wanted to lessen the impact of that reduction for youth and middle school students.
So I have a question about this. I think I asked the question because it just stood out as a pretty significant general fund increase of $2 million. So just to make sure that I understand just at a high level that you reduce resources in other places and plussed up this. So you reduce resources somewhere else in your department and it got put here.
You want me to answer that?
Yes.
So it was a reallocation prior to our constraint. So essentially we reallocated, we used, these funds were for reallocation and then we had constraint on top of that.
So within your own department budget, you made a prioritization of something got cut
Yes.
to pay for this. Okay, I just want to make sure that I understood that. Then I'm curious about because when I asked about it the other day, it was that all those funds were for the wage equity, and now it looks like there's actually not quite half of it is for additional staff. But I'm looking at the program offer, the 25145, and it actually looks like the two metrics that you have, number of children age 15 to 18 served, and the number of children who attend 30 days or more of after-school programming. It looks like actually the FY26 target is less than the FY25 budgeted, that you'd be actually serving fewer students, and you've reduced your target of number of students who attend 30 days or more from 9,200 to 6,000, which seems like you're actually serving less students. Well, you're projecting to serve less students, but you've got an additional almost $1 million in for additional staff.
Yeah, I can clarify.
Help me with the math.
Yeah. The change in the outcome is based off the current reality of what's happening in our school districts with the reduction in attendance rates. The number that you're pointing to is the number of students who participate 30 days or more. So what we're seeing is that attendance rates are lower across the state, the country. So it's becoming harder to be able to meet that 30-day or more outcome that is included in this. The total number of students served last year was 17,000. And that's actually an increase over time. Prior, 3 years ago, when we came back to in-person services, the total number served was 14,000. And that was due to just the lack of having that infrastructure. And so we're coming back and rebuilding the infrastructure of after-school programming, which is the reason why we were delayed in changing those outcomes, because we were seeing when are we plateauing and when are we going to get to this point where these numbers are repeated, because folks were working on rebuilding that infrastructure of after-school programming. And what we're seeing is that gap of 3,000 is due to several factors around a change in how the service is being delivered in summer. So we're partnering with our school districts to be able to do hubbing. That hubbing also has our community organizations provide programming to students who aren't in summer school. So we can't count those students towards that 30-day mark. And there are students who aren't attending school as high or as often as before. And so it's reducing the number of 30-day or more that folks are able to participate in.
Okay, so just to go back, well, you said that 25 number, I'm looking at the FY 25 number and the budgeted number, and it was actually 18,400, and the target this year is 18,000. So it looks like you're fewer students. And then it seems like if we're putting 2 million in total, and part of it is to have more consistency with staff, that we wouldn't just be saying we're going to accept, I mean, in theory, we should be getting a better, more number of students attending if we're putting in a significant investment versus just saying we're letting the trend go because we're making an investment.
I just want to, the 1.3 is going, so it's going for all of the Sun service system. So the wage increase, that 1.3 million is not just for this program offer of total students served.
Well, it all got mushed into the one program offer, so we have to be able to rely on what you put in the program offer and then what the outcomes are. So you're saying the outcomes are actually in other program offers?
So the for the total amount that's going to address wages, that 1.3 million is going to all of the program offers within the Sun service system.
So in theory, it probably should have just been spread out over the program offers? Or, I mean,
Yeah, I think that, so what I think Walter was speaking to before, Commissioner, was that in order to, and I think it's Commissioner Singleton was speaking to this about sort of in order for us to meet the needs from a pay equity perspective for the partners, community-based organizations who we work with, being able to provide wage increases across the Sun service system was critical in order to be able to provide this stabilization. So I do, and I from a technical perspective, it sounds like we may end up needing to do budget modification to make sure that these are in the correct offers. I don't know that this made it in. Didn't make it into an amendment based on, I didn't talk about it yesterday. So that didn't happen. So in order to make sure that all of our measures make sense so that from your perspective, I hear what you're saying, it's clear and it's concise and it makes sense. I think we are all in coming out of this difficult time where schools were greatly impacted during the pandemic. Obviously, children, families were greatly impacted during that time, and really trying to make sure that we have accurate sort of numbers that we think like we can meet, but we're always at DCHS trying to exceed those goals. I think part of this is this sort of prioritizing the structure of the Sun Community Schools and investing in stabilization of wages, like the relationships that students have with those Sun site managers is critical to the success of the program, right? It's part of in the goals of Sun, right? Is that I have a connection with this person after school. I often might see myself reflected in them more than I do in other staff within the school. There's a lot more representation within the Sun school system staff than sometimes there is in the school community. What I get to do in these after school spaces might be things that actually make me want to keep coming to school. So we want to increase those attendance numbers. That's part of the goal of Sun. And I think we're in this rebuilding. So whether we're trying to land right now because it does feel slightly unpredictable in the sense of like rebuilding school attendance and really trying to partner with our school partners to ensure that we have realistic outcomes, but also aspirational outcomes. We're not trying to do, the bare minimum. We want to be aspirational in everything that we do. And I think it's just, there's been a lot of fluctuation in terms of attendance. We do know that once students start coming to Sun regularly, that their actual attendance in school also increases. So there's a significant impact there as well. And so we want to increase those numbers of the number of students who attend 30 days or more. So I think when we do the budget modification, we can make sure that we feel good about what ends up as the outcomes for all of those different program offers based upon the investments that we're making. But this is, the 1.3 is not increasing staff. And Sun, each site costs the same regardless of how many students participate and how often, right? It doesn't, doesn't increase the costs if more students participate or decrease the cost if less do, because it's the staff is there for the folks who do participate. And so just, I think, continuing to reinvest in that, making sure that the types of services that are offered throughout the system, but specifically within Sun Community Schools, are meeting the needs of the youth and families so that we can increase that participation. But I think we have a conversation to come back to, it sounds like, for sure.
Thank you for that explanation. And just because I've been around Sun Schools for a long time, I recognize the value, what they offer, which is different from what our schools offer. A question though, because so the 1.3, I'm understanding now, is not just for the staff for this program offer. Is that the same thing for the 900,000, that it's spread over some other program offers as well? Because it looks like you're getting additional staff to support youth in middle and high school, but we're not seeing an increase actually in the number. So is this a systemic, or is this actually bleeding over into other cost centers or program offers that I should be looking at?
It would be going into the Sun Youth Advocacy Program offer, which is program offer 2514. Yes, thank you.
25149.
And the reason we're adding this these additional funds into the Sun Youth Advocacy Program, because of the similarities of the Successful Families youth work, we recognized that there was going to be a reduction, so we wanted to make sure that we prioritize those funds to go to Sun Youth Advocacy so that that work doesn't get drastically impacted and we can provide additional resources to that loss.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at this program offer now, and FY25 was 1,420, and your students served, and your 26 target is 1,000, but we're putting in another $1 million, or tell me what. So like, are you saying that 900,000 should be in program offer 25149?
Yes. Yes, it should. And so I can just speak, and we'll look at those program offers and make sure that they are updated if they're incorrect. I think, so I can just give a little bit of context around the fact that Successful Families, if it were to continue, would need to go through a procurement process. As it's not been sort of integrated as part of the Sun service system, I think we're aligned with you all in this, looking at opportunities to be efficient and make sure that programs that are connected to other programs are, streamlined whenever possible. And so either way, that program would have needed to be procured and go through a procurement process. And so because there's so many similarities to youth advocacy, the decision was to invest within the Sun service system and make sure that those programs are streamlined within Sun, to make sure that we aren't, dividing our efforts up in ways where we can't keep track of them in the same way that we would if it's embedded within a lot of the programs. A lot of the organizations who provided the programs through Successful Families are also Sun service system providers. And so we want to be able to invest in those programs. And I think from a Sun service system perspective, instead of a regional approach, there is an equity index that is used for the Sun service system, and to be able to, if additional investments were to be made, that those would be prioritized to the schools that are highest on the equity index. And so those are things that were considered from all of our perspective as we made, the decision to sort of streamline the program. So just to give context for others about why and what the kind of situation was related to Successful Families.
I'm not sure I still understand, because I'm looking at program 25149, which is the Sun Youth Advocacy Program. And then the slide that we have today, slide 8, says $900K for additional staff to support youth in middle and high schools in the Sun Youth Advocacy Program. So that's the same program, right?
It sounds like, oh, sorry, go ahead. I thought you were.
And it's projected we're going to serve 400 fewer students with almost $1 million more dollars. Just making sure, let's make sure that I've got
Yes.
the facts right.
So the outputs and outcomes of the number of students served within Sun Youth Advocacy, they've actually been, again, challenged with stability of the workforce. So a lot of our youth advocates have also had to have high turnover. So they've served less students because of the high turnover. And we, similar to what Rachel said, we are reevaluating the outputs and outcomes every year to make sure that we're keeping on track and that the goals are set for our agencies in a way that is meeting what's actually happening in the need, right? So our outputs and outcomes, we can make those updates once we've seen the workforce stabilization happen. That's where you're seeing those differences around the outputs and outcomes. Yeah, if that makes sense.
I may have missed this in earlier presentations, but have we been presented with a summary of our various, I don't know if they're contractors or grantees, I'm not sure the exact format, but I had the pleasure of serving on the allocation committee for the Portland Children's Levy, and the level of information and transparency that we were given on a per contract basis, you know, what we were achieving, how many people were served, were organizations hitting their outcomes? If not, there was like a brief narrative. I don't know if we have that in a report or something, but as a follow-up, I would really love to be able to kind of look at, I don't know if you have it for a few years, but just to see where we've gone and where we're going and kind of overall performance.
Yeah, we can certainly get that to you. I think just also important to remind and to know is that we just completed our RFPQ process, that all of this is part of sort of just reinvesting and strengthening SUN in those new contracts, and really like confirming expectations with our partners and making sure that like SUN is operating in the way in which we feel our children, students, families deserve. And so I think we're in that place right now as we are, you know, in those final stages and putting together those contracts. So we certainly can do that and then also follow back up as these new contracts start for this next year and sort of see if, you know, this new reinvestment is like getting us on the trajectory that all of us are wanting us to be on. Yeah.
I think just one thing I'll add here, and I know you're going to walk us a little bit through the SUN and successful families, but just to put out there what I'm hearing feedback on is that there's been some sort of communication, or it's been interpreted by people that they are able and potentially expected to still provide activities that had been under successful families, but without the dollars for the staff to do that. And because those dollars are going to wage increases, which they want, we again can be putting providers in a position of not understanding, should they take money to increase wages, or do they need to have staff to provide these activities that they're saying that they're being told they should still be providing under these existing POs. I think that the SUN schools in particular suffer terribly from the PO format because you cannot possibly explain to us in here how this actually functions. So I wanted to put that out there. I don't necessarily expect an answer. Maybe I'll get one here, but I would love some follow-up to understand when providers are reaching out to us and saying, we don't know what to do here. I don't have a good answer for them right now.
One thing I'll say, we'll certainly circle back, is that there's a lot, to your point, there's a lot within the SUN service system. There's a lot in those contracts, and each year budgets change. And so each year there's conversations and contract conversations about what they would be expected to provide or not expected to. And so depending on funding resources available, there could be additional expectations, but not without, funding. So there's a lot included. There was a lot included in the language around the RFP process as well, so that those types of things can be included if we find other funding resources to be able to embed those in, and we can negotiate. And obviously, we're in constant conversations with those providers about that. But I think this is a shift and it's a change. And so I think obviously continuing to provide more clarity so that our partners don't feel that they are in a position where they have to do something that they're not funded to do is going to be really important for us. And so I think it's good feedback.
Thank you. And I will just add, because you brought up contract negotiations, I think it's really important that as a county, again, this isn't just for DCHS, that we are being clear with our contractors on where there is space for that. And I'll give an example in that I previously would negotiate contracts where to increase staff salaries, I would decrease outcomes. And not every provider knows that that is something that's open to them. We have providers who are new. We have providers who come from communities where you don't push back on the government. So I think that we've got a lopsided system, again, across the county where some people know I can make this a negotiation and other people don't know that that's open to them. So I would hope as we're confused by all of these components, I know they know it better, but that we're really clear on if they say the outcome goals need to change for me to be able to do what you're asking me to do with the amount of money that I have, that we're making sure everybody knows that that's real.
All right.
There's a lot of green mics. I think you can go though.
Yeah.
We can go on to the next slide. And this one is talking about the successful families incorporation into the Sun Service System. And so, as I mentioned earlier, when we're talking about the Sun Service System, right, the Sun Service System is an alignment of services and programs that support youth and families. And those three key areas: early learning, youth family stability, youth and family advocacy, and it's really on our 6 districts. And then we have Successful Families, which is a series of different programs that support families and youth, with the majority of the funding going towards youth advocacy in 2 districts. And they also provide some other programs that support early learning and family support. And when we think about the incorporation of successful families into Sun, or talking about where there's similarities, the different components within early learning, like play and learn groups or connection with families at an early age, that's happening within the Sun Service System under our Parent-Child Development Services, under the P3 program. And so there's a continuation of that work and that effort happening within the Sun Service System around family support. That's also happening within the Sun Service System with our family resource navigators, our Sun site managers that are connecting with families. The key changes or improvements that are happening through Sun Youth Advocacy. So as we looked at the 2 programs that the funding from Successful Family focuses on with is the youth work in Successful Families and Sun Youth Advocacy, right? I mentioned they both are working to make sure that youth are graduating, that youth have a trusted adult, that youth feel validated and can work towards their own set goals. The areas in which there's differences within Successful Families and Sun Youth Advocacy is that Successful Families starts connecting youth earlier in the elementary school stages in some cases, and in youth advocacy, they're focusing more in the middle and high school, and that really has to do with capacity. There's wait lists for folks that participate in Sun Youth Advocacy, and because there's just such a high need, the priority population is our middle and high school students. For youth advocacy, they're also serving some of our elementary school kids, but the majority of their work is within their middle and high schools. So there would be that loss of that elementary component, but some of our community-based organizations do connect with 5th graders as they transition into middle and into middle school. The other component that is different between Successful Families and Youth Advocacy youth programs is that Successful Families has a higher emphasis on family engagement and connection with families. So one thing we added to Sun Youth Advocacy in our program model is to engage in that family support relationship. We added that as an expectation for Sun Youth Advocacy. Successful Families prizes or really focuses on providing and connecting with culturally specific providers and providers that are culturally responsive. The Sun Service System also expects that all of our providers are culturally responsive, and we have culturally specific services as well. So a lot of the providers that we're doing Sun Youth Advocacy are the same providers that we're doing support for the youth-specific successful families, and at times we're the same supervisors. And so those are the key learnings that we're taking from Successful Families youth work, is that family engagement component, and also partnering with our school districts to address disproportionate discipline disparities.
So can I get a follow-up on outcomes from even just year to date on these two different programs? I'm a little bit concerned about the loss of access to that service for the younger kids, particularly for communities of color, but I'd like to see what the kind of data actually looks like. And then as part of this kind of reorg, did we lose positions in East County schools for some of these? So without Successful Families, we don't necessarily have those Sun Youth services for some of the East County schools. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And how many schools do you know?
Well, the schools would still continue to get support through Sun Youth Advocacy. So our Sun service system is in 93 community schools, and youth advocates are primarily in the middle and high school of those 92 schools that are middle and high school. So there wouldn't be a loss of service completely. It would just be a reduction in those East County sites.
So, and I think part of that investment just depend the reinvesting in youth advocacy. There are some, opportunities to ensure that, and a lot of the East County schools are the highest on the equity index. So that's why when we say using that as a guidepost for how we prioritize is important, and we can provide that information to you, so you can see that and sort of understand that is how Sun prioritizes. So there might be opportunity as youth advocacy tries to ensure that investments are in the right schools, that there would be more opportunity to support those schools. So it's more about, part of the goal there is to streamline the resource, to have it embedded within the Sun service system. And if there will be opportunity as time, goes on, and as we navigate moving into this year, to make sure that investments are appropriately allocated to the right schools.
All right, if there's not any other questions, we'll release Walter. Thank you, Walter.
Yes.
Actually,
One more
wait.
question.
Sorry, Walter. Close that computer real too soon.
actually, I have a question for you later on. I thought it was the whole panel going away.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, you're okay. You can, right? It wasn't for Walter? It wasn't for Walter.
You are released. And next up, we'll have Lolita.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask with time what you want. So I know that there's things you all want. I just think we want to do a time check on how you want us to navigate the time that we have.
Yeah, so we're scheduled till 4. I would say we probably have a half hour left. So I don't know how many slides. Because that way we would have at least 1 hour to start our amendment conversation.
Well, good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Lolita Broadus. I manage the Housing and Stability Team in YFS, and I am here to talk a little bit about the Multnomah Stability Initiative, also known as MSI. MSI is a longstanding housing and economic stability program within YFS. MSI provides supportive services, including case management through culturally specific and responsive organizations. The goal here is to help families achieve self-sufficiency by addressing barriers to economic and housing stability. In MSI, families identify their interests, strengths, choices, and goals, and are connected with resources and services that help them increase and maintain financial and housing stability. As you can see on the slide, case managers provide, so a part of the MSI program, they provide assertive case management, They assist families in stabilizing housing, including providing access to short-term rent assistance, job employment development, income and asset programs, and flexible client assistance funds. They also connect families to natural supports in the community, like support groups and school programs. Additional support through HSD provides long-term housing vouchers through the ARLA program, which is managed by Home Forward and HSD. YFS doesn't have separate funding for long-term rent assistance, just as a quick note. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. What is the SHS investment in MSI? The SHS funding included in this offer is the value of 140 long-term rent assistance vouchers that are made available to MSI participant households through Home Forward. As a part of the larger ARLA voucher program, these are not managed directly by DCHS. MSI was identified a few years ago to have access to a set of ARLA vouchers for households that show a need for long-term housing support in order to achieve stability. MSI has shown a high level of success in getting families successfully connected to vouchers. Next slide, please. In fiscal year 24, the MSI program funded by Federal Community Services Block Grant funding and CGF saw the following successes. Served over 500 households. 82% of those served identified as BIPOC. Achieving housing stability outcomes, 90% of households remained in permanent housing 6 months after exit from the program. For the ARLA housing vouchers managed by HSD and Home Forward and made available to MSI participants, the housing retention rate for MSI enrolled participants at 12 months was 97.4%. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll open it for questions. Feels like we've been in this room without leaving, but so I can't believe like time is flying by, but you guys have actually already been here for an hour. So I want to just recognize that. I thought we would only have been talking for a half hour. So, but you only have a few more slides. So I just wanted to say, if you wanted to, it seems like you're moving through these slides fairly quickly, but I just wanted to acknowledge that.
I just have a quick question. What is the eligibility criteria to be involved in Multnomah Stability Initiative for a family?
Sorry. That you have kids under the age of 18. Also that there's a 200% AMI, so there's a income criteria, and that you are currently housed.
And for the vouchers, what was the criteria for being eligible for rental vouchers?
I am going to say the same criteria through Home Forward. So Home Forward has criteria for the vouchers, so it's a Home Forward, but it's there based on their.
Mine is a short question, but probably a very long answer that I can take as follow-up or just further conversation. I don't think there's the ability to impact any of this in the budget this year. But when MSI was first recreated, it used to do more homeless family stuff, and we separated homeless family system of care and MSI with the vision that families, you remember this, with the vision that families would come out of the homeless family system of care and be able to connect to MSI for the longer term supports. And that just, my whole time in these systems never came to fruition. Has that goal been abandoned? Is it still a work in progress? Or is it something that we need to rethink and figure out? And again, I can take that as follow-up. I know it's a longer conversation.
Well, I have a part of an answer for you, and then I'm happy to follow up. But one of the things, I don't know if you all had an opportunity to hear about the Bridge program, which was a part of MSI, and that was really the goal, was to connect families, because the waiting list would be so hard, or would be kind of impossible for families to get into MSI, just as it stands. But just those that were transitioning from the mobile housing, and then they would try to transition them into a MSI-like program so that they could receive those receive those services. We tried that with as a pilot this year with an organization. And I don't know if it was just that it was post-pandemic and it was really kind of tough. I think we didn't, I don't want to say it was failed, but it was really tricky because there was timeline and money that needed to be spent under the mobile housing. And then there was money that was given in this other program and that they just weren't meeting. We just didn't have the right dynamic for the program. But yes.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I would love to have more conversation again on the other side of the budget because there's a there for me that never got figured out. And I feel like we can figure it out.
And now we have another team, I believe, coming over, so.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
My name is Marina Kalina, and I use she and her pronouns, and I'm Senior Manager at Community Services Program at Aging, Disability, and Veteran Services. We are here to talk about Nutrition Services Program, and this is the program that you had few questions for us. Apologies. In the slide, you see few allocations for year 24, 25, and 26 fiscal years for the nutrition programs. And we were asked questions about targeted allocations for targeted meals. And in 24, in the fiscal year 24, we had 450,000 meals provided by this program. And that was the allocation, this was the allocation for 150,000 meals in 2024. Our actual numbers in that year were 479,134 meals that were actually provided to our consumers. In 2025, our target, seemingly decreased, and it was 360,000 meals that we projected that we could provide, and there were few issues that were connected with this projection. The first was that our state and federal funding were decreased. We also had increase in the meals that were in the meal costs that our providers and our partners reported they were actually using for the, to purchase the meals. And the third one, we also increased our rate for our culturally specific meals. So because our funding, actually the state funding and ARPA funding decreased, and all other, those other factors contributed for us to do a really conservative estimate for our projected meals for year 2025. So there was a question from you last time, from you, all commissioners, that, total program offer, why we target, why our projected target numbers stayed the same, 360,000. And this is the what happened when we were projecting for year 2025. We had only 3/4 of our data gathered, and so we couldn't be more accurately estimating how much meals will occur. So we did very conservative estimate. And then now after you asked the question, we pulled the data, and now we have more data for the year 25, and we can more accurately estimate that we will serve approximately 452,270 meals in fiscal year 2025. And we believe that for fiscal year 26, funding will allow for the estimate of 444,483 meals. And that's the answer for your question. And then you have second question, and I think I'm going to ask Jacob talk about the second question about how much additionally to the proposed budget would it cost to budget for 460,000 meals. Any questions about this data so far?
So I don't know if to ask now or to wait for the second piece.
Probably if budget numbers, Jacob.
Marina?
Okay. So I think I have a question, but why don't you go ahead and provide the second half of, are you providing the second half of?
Second half. Okay. Or did you have a question for me about these numbers?
Well, I think I had a question a little bit about the last statement you made, because Commissioner Jones-Dixon and I put in, of course, an amendment to, because it looked like we were going from 479 down to 360, which seemed like a pretty significant drop. But then in the response that we got in our email, based on the new projections, it looks like, if I understand the answer, that you could, and what I think you just said is that we could provide 444,000 with this current program offered. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, and maybe this is where the second piece comes in, because that's 444,000 is almost back to the 100,000. And so I was questioning, do we need to have an amendment if we're pretty close? So you're essentially, what the slide though is saying is to get to 460, which is the difference, the delta between 460 and 444 is $16,000, but you're saying it would cost $269,000 to get those 16,000 more meals?
Jacob?
Those are expensive meals. Or not?
That is correct. And that's, I think that's what we hear from our providers and from our contractors. We actually look at actual cost during the pandemic and after pandemic, how the meal cost increased. And we actually pulled these numbers from, our current use and current rates for the meal. And we are also, we're committed to increase this, the culturally specific meal cost. And so in that, we also pulled these numbers from our contractors. It's their actual numbers that they reported.
But if the commission did nothing and just approved the budget as it is, you're projecting that we'd get 444,000 meals, not the 360 that's in the program offer.
Correct.
You're nodding, or are you going to add something else?
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Jacob Messman. I use he and him pronouns. I work as a budget manager for Aging, Disability, and Veteran Services, and that is correct. So with your question about an amendment, that could work for us if we'd like to do an amendment to resubmit to increase those, the number of meals. To your point about the expense.
But let me just ask a question about that. Yeah. But if we didn't offer an amendment, you're saying with the current dollars in that program offer, you'd get 444,000.
That's our projection, yeah.
Right, versus the 360 target that's actually there, which is what initially got me going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add the projection is really conservative because when we, prepare for the budget, it's in December. We have no numbers yet from the state for our budget, and we don't have the data, actual data for the meals. So that's our conservative projections, barring that we were losing, two sources of our budget.
And were you going to say something about the second piece, the 16,000 more for 260?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we have essentially five different meal rates. There's different meal rates for culturally specific providers, and there's due to a number of different factors. There's congregate meals, there's home delivered meals for culturally specific providers as well as culturally responsive providers, and then we also have meals that are provided through Meals on Wheels at a subsidized rate. And so if you'd like me to kind of walk through the specifics of the 269, I'm happy to, kind of how we calculated that, or?
Well, I was just going to try and do a calculation of how much that was per meal, because it just seemed like
Yeah,
a lot. But is that some sort of blended rate, or?
It's the rate is our standardized rate that we did a RFPQ last year, and we worked with the providers. And one of the things that we had feedback about was in the previous RFPQ 5 years ago, we actually kind of negotiated rates based on need from a kind of equity perspective. And we realized when we did a look back and an evaluation that actually didn't feel good to providers, even though we kind of went in with the best of intentions. And so we heard their feedback and actually did standardized rates. And so so that 269,000 is using those standardized rates that we came up with for the most recent RFPQ with the providers. Yeah, and I can kind of walk through if you'd like, kind of each of the rates and
maybe afterwards, because I don't know that everybody needs to go.
Sure.
Unless everybody wants to, but I guess I'm going to just ask then. So if it's 444,000 meals, the people who are providing meals this year wouldn't see a substantial.
That's correct.
Substantial reduction, given sort of the new revised target that we just got, which is 444 versus 360. Is the other piece that you've added a lot more providers that are, so the pie is roughly the same, but it's being divided?
So we actually have one additional provider that's
Just one.
Just one through this RFP. We actually had two, and then which turned into just one through the contracting process. And that provider serves meals to homeless community. And so so there is one additional provider, but I think that what I'm hearing from comments is that you're hearing that there's less meals for providers. And I think kind of what we're seeing is that we've had about $5 million in ARP funding over the last 5 years. And so a couple of years ago, we had this kind of huge increase of funding that went into the provider community, and we've been kind of tapering off over the last couple of years so that we didn't have a funding cliff. And so we've done our best to sort of, slowly titrate down on the amount of funding and planfully kind of come back to, where we were pre-COVID, and that doesn't feel good, and it doesn't, we'd like to be able to do more, but the money's not there. And so I think that there's just not enough funding, essentially, and so we're kind of doing the best with what we have.
Yeah, just a comment back. I do think that sort of hearing two things. The reaction was some of the things we're hearing from the community. So in District 3, there's some culturally specific providers that have heard things from. And when I looked at the program offer, I was reacting to the
Sure,
the
the low
360,
number.
which looks
Absolutely.
like, oh, we're going to next year. I mean, what it told me is like next year we're planning on producing or providing 100,000 fewer meals, which seemed like a.
That it's going to drop even more than expected. Yeah, and we were really happy to see that that's not what we're expecting now. We kind of went into this.
Well,
with
it's
a
good. It's good
conservative
news.
estimate. Yeah, it was good news. Yeah.
I just also want to add to this that, because of the leveling of the funding, right, when we did the projections, we also we're committed completely to keep our old providers at the same funding level, and that was our goal. And so with we did keep everybody on, and we kept them whole, basically, and we had additional provider. So, but our projections were more likely, like we don't want to overestimate what we can provide, right? So our projections were more conservative than our intent to serve more meals per parent.
Right, thank you. Any more questions on this? Because we have, I think, one more topic for DCHS. All right.
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question because you mentioned that this is more costly. I just am not sure I'm clear on that because the way I calculated it's only like $2.69 a meal. So I'm not sure about. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, it's not bad. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's not really that costly, really. So I just wanted to clarify
I
that.
know my math was $5.30 though. We should leave it to Jacob. We should leave it to Jacob to like give us the idea. Sure, yeah.
I would like to have here more detail on your final 269. As initially it looked like.
Initially, it looked like there were going to be 100,000 fewer meals, and I'm hearing very clearly, that's not now the projection.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's never good to do math on the fly.
Yeah, I think the last topic, and I won't say a lot before turning it over to y'all for any questions you might have in regards to legal services. We've heard that there were questions about that. This first slide shows what remains in our budget for legal services and youth and family services. In FY26, obviously legal services, there's a variety of different legal services across the department outside of youth and family services. So ADVSD has a program that supports folks, seniors with some pro bono legal services, and IDD more has programs that sort of navigate to and support folks in getting connected with. But most of the legal services I think that are up for conversation are in youth and family services. So the funding that remains is for domestic violence legal services, the legal services and support. So those are those legal service days that are both, and those are both connected. That program offer is connected to MSI and also connected to Family Unification Program for the expungement part of those programs and helping people remain housed. So that program offer remains in FY26 in the current budget, and the legal services that I referred to in ADVSD. So the next slide shows the legal services that you all are discussing and may have questions for. So we'll just stop there since we don't have a lot of time to see what questions you might have around these 4 program offers. Unless you want me to talk through them, or Lori too.
Why don't we open up for questions?
On program offer 25131, I don't see A, but I believe there is an A that also received a reduction. Is that correct?
That's one. Is that the one that we?
Oh, was that on the previous slide? Sorry.
There,
That's the legal services and support. That's the legal service day, so that's retained. Sorry, my brain is not braining. Math is not mathing.
So 25131A was restored in the chair's budget. Are you saying
Yeah.
to its full allocation? Well, I could take that out of my amendment.
Okay, any other questions on legal services? All right. Any other?
I actually, this is like more, and I'm not sure if you all are the ones to provide it, but are these services mostly contracted services?
Yes.
And is there a reason why they're contracted versus county services?
Can you say more about what are you asking?
Well, again, this is just sort of like, when do we contract and when do we provide county service? Are these integrated with other other services we offer, or are they just free standalone?
I mean, the legal defense, they have to be attorneys, so I know for sure that's done by legal teams. I know there are things that we do, for example, eviction prevention, some of it, I know we do, but there are other things that it's also our community-based organizations also, they are in the communities, and also in lots of ways, it's also a lot more affordable for us to do that. So that's my just gut reaction, but we can spend more time with you if you want to and get you a little bit more comprehensive answer.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for DCHS before we let them go?
No, but I'd love to introduce an amendment before they leave the room because they were a part of making this happen, and I want to make sure they hear about it.
Go for it.
Great. So Commissioner Moyer and I are sharing an amendment that will backfill the MHIT program in conversations. And thank you, Mohammed and Irma, for the time yesterday to talk about this and really figure out that there's the ability to do matching funds when we use general fund for this program. And so still removing the SHS to move over potentially into the amendment that I had put forward, but this backfills HMIT with $371,472 of general fund, which then can be matched with about $665,295 from Medicaid, bringing the program back up to whole and having 5 FTE just funded with different dollars. So thank you, everybody, for working on that. I know that was not the easiest conversations, but I appreciate getting to a really good result that I think utilizes our resources in a more appropriate manner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, DCHS. Appreciate everyone being here. Lots of good conversations. There were a couple of things that came up in comments that were bigger than DCHS, but looking at wages and everything. And I know we have Chris Neal in the room, as well as some of his team, to really consider those as we're talking about and thinking about the conversations that we want to have ongoing around some of these questions around contracting and wages and outcomes. So for the rest of this afternoon, which is about an hour right now, we have time for conversation to kick off our conversation around board amendments. And I wanted to appreciate staff for all the work that they have done in board staff to try to think through how we can best start having these conversations. We have time today, we have time tomorrow afternoon, and then we have time next week before we have to vote on the budget. So as staff was thinking through some of the best ways to organize these conversations, their suggestion was to focus on a couple of different topics for today, including loan FER, because there's multiple amendments on loan FER. There is employment services, as well as human resources and the CIU. And I want to make sure that I'm looking, so those were how they, what they suggested we tap on first. So we have different amendments. If we like, we could invite Christian up to walk through kind of what the amendments are, or we could just start our conversations just up to the board if anybody would like Christian to walk through them.
Okay. Are we starting with loan FER?
We were, yeah.
I said, are we starting, is that where we're
Yeah.
starting?
And we have big pieces of paper. Well, your wish is coming true.
A big version.
I think I already have this one.
Yeah. Sure. Absolutely. Not walk through, but, you know, share.
So, hi, everyone. For the record, Christian Elkin, County Budget Director. I use she, her pronouns. So I've handed you 2 packets today, which you're familiar with because they're up on our website, but they've been updated through yesterday's board meeting. We're not as good as getting today's on there right now. So the first, the big spreadsheet, which is very exciting to get it printed out where I can actually read it, is basically the math spreadsheet. So what this is doing is, you'll see up at the top in the box with the blue headers, is the proposed kind of funding sources and the revenue amendments that have been put on the table to date. So you can see that we have $1.1 million of one-time only general funds available to reappropriate in this budget, and just under $800,000 of ongoing general fund to reappropriate. And then below in the boxes that kind of start with the green headers are the amendments that you all have proposed to date. And let me just walk you through. On the left side are what we're calling the additional expenditures, or things and programs that you want to fund or restore or expand. And then on the right side are the proposed offsets that you've provided to date. And some of the amendments have offsets, some of them don't. Commissioner Singleton, your swaps kind of break my brain a little bit and break this spreadsheet a little bit. So I just want to acknowledge that they might not be exactly correct, but I think the idea of what we're trying to do here is there, and we will always make the math work at the end. And one thing I want to point out about the offsets is that the same offset is being used in multiple amendments. So the summary total at the bottom doesn't work on the right side of the spreadsheet because we can't double and triple count. It will have to be balanced at the end, but wanted to just make sure that your amendments were out there kind of as how you propose them in front of the board. The second package that I provided you, which is the kind of thicker package, is the narrative that explains your amendments. And so both of these documents are up on our website. The June 3rd one isn't there yet. We literally just got this done over lunchtime, and so I haven't sent it to Diana to post yet, but these will all be up there, and it just basically gives that more in-depth detail behind the why of the amendment. Commissioner Moyer, we were able to get the information around the COLA freeze in there for you, so that's been detailed out as well. And any time that I saw any blanks or any opportunity to kind of add a little bit more detail around the program offer names or anything that you all provided, that's been put into this document for you. I do want to daylight that I got Commissioner Brim Edwards' amendment wrong a couple days ago around the animal emergency services. And so that number's been updated to the $200,000 amendment number. So I apologize for that. And then if you see anything on here that is wrong or mischaracterized, please let me know and we'll be happy to change that immediately. So with that, if you want to start with Lone Fir, I believe there are currently.
Yeah, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Where's the COLA one? And do you tell us somewhere, second page? That narrows it down. What page?
Let's see if I can find the number. So the COLA freeze one is, thank you, is amendment number 35.
And then this is just will you send us all the criteria? Like, for example, I understand from yesterday it's non-representative management, but I'm wondering, is there any like threshold? Because you can be at management and not be a high income earner.
Yes, so we can send you what that criteria is. Basically, we used in Workday, when HR puts our positions into Workday, they catalog them based on a coding structure of true management versus positions that could have managerial duties but are not required to have managerial duties. And so we took the bottom, the ones that are not required to have true managerial duties, and removed them from the assessment.
Yes, so one of the things that, and this is just a request so that I always want to know like what the intended impact is, because that's an attractive number. But what, like a scattergram of what incomes those are. So for example, say like if there's a whole host of managers that are at 90,000 versus, the thicker part being, over 100K. So I'd be interested if we could see like where those fall, and certainly want to know the lowest threshold of people who, they're managers, not just have managerial duties.
Yeah, and we can get you that. I do need to acknowledge that the budget system is not an HR system, and so we populate it with employees based on, in November, to get an estimate of what that position is going to cost us, but we don't keep the budget system in real time with the HR system because the budget would be changing every single day because we have so much movement in our employees. So we can get you that broad kind of how it was budgeted, but it's not going to be exactly of who we have employed on staff today. And so any adjustments that you make, or if you wanted to draw a line at a certain point, we would implement that in the live system, but the estimate might not be dead on. So I'd just like to acknowledge that.
But you can get an approximation.
I can get you an approximation and send you a spreadsheet that shows you that
I'm most
approximation.
concerned about where the density, the lower end.
Yes. I bet you someone's working on that spreadsheet right now behind me.
You've already delivered it.
Any other questions?
So is it possible, sorry, because these aren't necessarily grouped the way that we're planning on talking about them in these meetings.
They're just grouped how they came in.
They just grouped, okay.
And even then, it was how I was taking my notes and then the emails that I was getting, so that there's no significance kind of in the 1 through 39 number there, just just getting them on the list.
So I wonder if we could, like, as staff was having conversations about, they're suggesting, like, the way that they've grouped it, if we can add a column for, I don't know, like, topic or something like that, or area or something like that, and then, and group it like that, so we can, do you know what I mean?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to see where we're going to fit the column.
Yep.
I totally know what you mean. I'm just,
Yes.
wow, the paper is like, you even played with the margin.
I know, these are very tiny margins. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out how we can group the conversation. Or have, otherwise, I mean, we're going to be flipping through pages.
Departments or?
Well,
We have that column.
so staff had recommended that, like, for instance, today, that we talk about loan for employment services and HR and CIU. And so we can do that. So Christian, was there anything else you wanted to talk about with overall with the spreadsheet? The loan for amendments are 3 and 14. It also says TBD on my sheet, so I didn't know if there was any other loan for amendments that folks had that we were planning on bringing forward, or if we can.
Number 36 came yesterday.
Okay.
So and this may be outside the scope of, I'm not sure who's doing it, but do we have the construction schedule for the memorial? One question I had is whether we needed in the next fiscal year to actually provide a maintenance fund, because if some may not even be built yet. So I don't know, do we have a timeline for when that will be? And it doesn't mean you can't do it at the front end, but I'm just wondering if this is a need to pay for this fiscal year or a future.
Yes, so I am going to, so I think the estimated time for completion is the end of fiscal year end of calendar year 2026 at this point. I think that's the latest that I'd heard, which is actually fiscal year 27 for construction to be completed on it.
So if we were to commit some funds, we'd actually just be putting them on the account. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but just so we know, it's like the opportunity, they're not opportunity costs.
Yeah. I mean, and again, like, I think, I was just looking if anybody from staff wanted to correct me, but that's what my understanding is, that it's like, if we're looking at the end of calendar year 26, that's actually, technically fiscal year 27, so.
Well, and I actually have questions for Metro. I'm struggling with why Metro, who owns this park, is asking us for O&M. And I don't know if that's a question we can get out there, but I've never seen another jurisdiction ask a different one to pay for operations and maintenance of a park that they own. And I don't feel like during the presentation that we had of the project that we heard from Metro kind of this was a part of bond funding. I'm a little lost on what happened to all the funding they had to do this memorial and why the ask is coming to us to fill that funding gap.
Yeah, I brought up the endowment, the operation that we call it the endowment fund for cemeteries. Just from my experience, it's just another way to own what happened, what we did over the last 50 years ago. So I thought it would just be another gesture, and something I wanted to discuss as a board. But it would be good to talk to Metro about the funding and how are they using the money that's coming in from the folks that are being interred there currently moving forward.
I do think it's important in the conversation about just the memorial that it was always the intent that Multnomah County participate in the cost of the memorial, is my understanding. And
That's different than O&M.
totally, I'm just trying to differentiate the issue. And I think I feel pretty strongly about getting to the 2.5 million, because otherwise it is a significantly scaled back project, of which, one of the things that would come off the table is the altar, of which it was directly destroyed by our construction of that building. It no longer exists. And so, I have been working with several of you around this issue. And I think we can talk through what's been put forward so far for funding, and then some potential other options if we haven't got all the pieces together for that funding.
And I really like the timeline component of that. Is what, since it's OTO, is it all this year? Is there next additional years that we can look at what might be opportunity to fund? But also getting some time to have some conversation with Metro.
On the maintenance side of things.
Yeah, yes. And because my understanding when I've heard this ask of 2.5 has been that some of it is seeding O&M. And I want that disaggregated. I want the construction cost disaggregated from O&M to understand what it actually takes to complete construction and what the O&M costs are that are being asked for.
I heard it was the 2.5 was strictly for the construction of the memorial. And then I added, we should consider OM costs moving forward post that. So, but we need to get that clear.
Yeah, because that's not what I heard when they presented to us here as a board on what the project was.
What does the program offer say?
The program report doesn't speak to that because it's only for $1 million. It's $1 million, right? It's to, so it doesn't speak to the ongoing maintenance of it. I will say, like, I appreciate that the board is really interested in this. Obviously, this was something that I thought was a priority for Multnomah County to contribute to in my executive budget. The conversations where we were reached out to about this, from my perspective, really started in 2023 when folks came to my office to talk about the need to have additional funding for this project. And I understand that there was a memorandum of understanding between Metro and the county, like in 2007 or 2009. I can't remember exactly when that happened, about working on this project together. But to my knowledge, when this project was put forward as part of the Metro Parks and Natural Area bond for 2019, there was no outreach at that time to Multnomah County to talk about how we would be involved or how we would support that effort or the construction or the work around loan for block 14, or the lot 14 at that point. So it was, again, it was after there was a realization that construction costs were going to exceed what was initially budgeted or allocated in that 2019 bond measure that outreach to the county happened. And that was when that number of 2.5 million was brought forward, because that was the gap that they had at the time between what had originally been allocated from that measure and then what was actually needed with rising construction costs and realization of, ongoing maintenance costs and things like that. So I just want to provide that background because I would say this was a project that had already been, funded and planned and work was going on. I think Metro has already spent $2 million of the original, $4 million or something for planning. So where we were brought into this project was really when the funding gap was identified.
I just keep saying Metro, which is like an entity and not a person. So I don't know who the specific person is. Is that follow-up that you'll take on, or is that something we should take on?
I'm going to phone a friend here and say there's probably a couple people in the chair's office that are probably working on that right now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Literally just got a chat. So
So I've been in really regular contact on this issue. The original ask for construction, which was based off of the conceptual drawing at, I want to say 30%, was $2.3 million. It was also before tariff gate. Whatever is happening with tariffs, I don't even know.
tacos.
Taco? It was before taco. As they got to 90% of conceptual drawing and we're starting to take into account material and other factors, they felt like 2.3 might not get it completed, and so that's how they moved to 2.5 when they hit the 90% drawing, is my understanding in my conversations with them. The 2.5 does not include any ongoing maintenance. But I don't, they have not gone out for bid because they don't yet have funding, so it's not obviously a final number.
Okay, and I'm going to ask staff to share the information that was just sent to me to the whole board after this meeting, just so people have it. But it looks like these were the budget numbers that we received last summer in a conversation, was that the total project need was 5.96 million. And those costs are broken out above that, but I'm not going to go into line by line. The dedicated Metro bond funds were 4.24 million of that. There was a state grant of $20,000 that they received for that. And then the unmet need that they came to us last summer was 1.7 million. So obviously costs have gone up, since then, but just to give a little perspective on that.
And I think, again, I don't have any idea how Metro has managed their funds, and again, I don't know how that has impacted this. Obviously, that was not the Chinese community's decision-making regarding how much Metro set aside for the building of the memorial versus other costs. And I would not want us to consider Metro's potential reduction in the funding that they have available for construction kind of against the community ask, because I think they've largely been consistent, and we can have a conversation with Metro or not. But also I feel like we are the responsible party for the hurt that is been done. And so
I don't think anyone disagrees. I think for me, I'm trying to get to, again, because we're all using the same offsetting cuts for multiple programs. And so I want to get to what we can actually do with that doesn't mean to the detriment of other things that are policy priorities. And it's, for me, not having the answers of what the actual dollars are. And these amendments that we have, the three of them, there's duplication in what's being asked for. Between two amendments, we have 1 million, it looks like 50,000 for O&M, and then another 1,500,000 to get to the 2.5. And so it would be helpful to understand, like, I don't know, there's competing amendments that are doing a lot of the same things, and I definitely think 1,050,000 is in O&M is not our responsibility.
So one other thing,
I think the proposal, sorry, Commissioner, is, and tell me if I'm wrong here, it's $1 million towards capital and $50,000 towards O&M for a total of $1,050,000. And if I've mistyped that somewhere, that is my error.
So there's two amendments.
Technically.
There's three. But, so then can you help me understand then your amendment if it's not on top of? No, amendment number 36?
It's on top of is to make it whole. So my amendment is to ensure that the full $2.5 million.
but
So they're the same.
Correct.
but you have 50,000.
Okay. You don't care which one.
Can drop it.
You guys should probably just go sponsor.
Well, we have, I think
there's also the amendment that Commissioner Bryn Edwards and I put forward, which was the first amendment on this issue, which was 500,000.
Which we indicated was just the first
Installment.
One of the things about this is we just think about what is the size of what we want to put in here. I was just asking the chair about who's running the project. That I think it would be important that we, since it's Metro, that whatever our contribution is, it's clearly that's a defined contribution, not a open-ended project, because we don't have any ability to control sort of Metro's costs. And so for me, that would be an important thing that if we close the gap, we close the gap. And if Metro runs the project in a way in which they don't control all their costs, then they close the gap on the construction side of things. I'm hesitant to be, if we were managing the project, that would be different because we actually would have some ability to provide some oversight and sort of value engineering or be able to monitor it. But if we're making a payment essentially to Metro, I would want to have some guardrails around expectations.
And I appreciate you bringing that up because I think that has been my concern, is that we don't really have insight into how the project has been managed thus far. We just know that it's been managed, and obviously we know that there have been increases in construction costs, but it's been, there is a gap between what was originally proposed for the construction, and that's really where they came to us. But I don't have a deep knowledge or understanding of how that project had been managed up to that point when it was, or frankly, how it's being managed now too.
Yeah, I'm assuming we could draft some sort of IGA with Metro.
And there's existing ways to
Then
get
something
something to
that
Metro. Yeah.
set some expectations.
And what are the funding sources? The only funding source I see is in amendment number 3. And I might be missing it, but I don't see a funding source in 14 or 36.
yeah, and we can pull 36 and just rock with the, we go with 14, just to limit, so there's
So
no
it's cleaner.
confusion.
Okay.
It's duplicative.
And then I want to ask staff to reach out to Metro and just see what the timeline for the project is, if they're still expecting the end of F26 for the project, what can be, what they might need next year versus in other outgoing years, just so we have a sense of that. Okay. Anything else folks want to talk about on loan for, it sounds like, so we've got some follow-up information that are going to be heading our way. Good.
I'm wondering if we have some certainty on the timeline that it's actually not going to be completed until the following fiscal year, that if there's an agreement that the maintenance piece, if we do it at all, would wait till the next fiscal year? If we can just dispense with that now, I don't know.
I think that makes sense.
So then we're looking at
not voting,
one time, it's a future, I'm just saying it's a future conversation, but if, it seems like it may not be a conversation we need to have now, so we can focus on what is the construction piece that we want to do?
I will also say, I just want to say that makes sense to me. And also I am not on board with the county paying for ongoing maintenance costs at this point either. I think that's something that, it's a metro park and they put it in their bond measure. So I don't know how they were expecting to do those ongoing maintenance when, or as they had it proposed to develop in the first place.
There's a little clarity. One item.
One item.
Well,
35 to go.
well, sort of, right? Because I'm still struggling with what are the offsetting cuts. So I see the puts, I just want to know what the takes are when we get there.
Yeah. And that maybe just goes to the bigger process. So like having that in a parking lot, like do we have, if from whatever, 1.5?
Can I just add a comment about that, Commissioner? And I think this is important because how we do this math is going to matter, right? And I just said we're double counting a lot of things. And so one of the things we were talking about at board staff is I really wanted to bring you an amendment sheet that represented how you all put those amendments on the table. One of the things that we've done in the past is kind of when all the ideas are on the table, I've been calling it taking it from a wide spreadsheet to a tall spreadsheet, where basically I take all the offsets that are on the right-hand side, move them up to proposed available funding resources of, that can be available kind of in that blue column. And then you start to see what are the hard choices I have minus the revenue amendments, because I don't think those are hard choices for you all. At least I hope they're not. And then these are the hard choices we have to make if we want to prioritize some of these programs down below. And so I just want to, that is something that my office can do for the next set of conversations, is to kind of flip this spreadsheet and bring it to you in a different way. But I do want to acknowledge that's not how you propose the amendments. And so until I kind of get everybody on board, I don't want to do that right now.
So I have a little discomfort there because I did do a lot of work to provide offsets for my amendments. And so I think we can get there, but I wouldn't want the offsets that I'm proposing to be put into a list for others to pick from. I know we're going to have to do some negotiating, but starting there feels hard for me. And not to say that it doesn't for others, but I was very intentional about what I was cutting and for which programs and what the funding source, and whether it was ongoing, one-time only, SHS, or general fund. And I have a one-pager for you that might make mine a little cleaner, because I did mess up my math. So that just, I don't know how, I don't want to act like mine are special because they're not, but I also I've gone through the painstaking process of finding offsetting cuts that would fund the programs that I had different policy priorities around, or with other commissioners who co-sponsored those with me.
Yeah, I echo some of that, although we quite literally put the same cuts on the table at the same time. So understand the need to not double count. But I do think that there is some conversation about I don't necessarily just want to be known as the commissioner who loves to cut the budget, contrary to popular belief. Because none of that was easy to put forward. I'm sure Commissioner Singleton felt the same way, and people have feelings, which they should and have every right to have feelings, but it is hard to have done that and taken the criticism that is fair anytime you're proposing a trade-off, but then to not actually get the trade-off. I think it needs to be negotiated. Not that it's set in stone, but I do think it should be a negotiated back and forth and not just like tallyless. And I don't necessarily know if every reduction that has been put on the table will have majority support.
So I think it's a both and, right? Like for me, it would be helpful to see everything that's been proposed as a revenue offset and just to see what that total is, and then just to see everything that's been proposed as a additional expenditure and what that total is. But that doesn't mean that the long one, we shouldn't be using that, or we shouldn't be thinking about amendments in terms of what had been proposed specifically for that amendment. But I think because I will admit, at this point, I don't have the scope of the universe between what the revenue is available and that's been identified for potential cuts, and what the total of the proposed expenditures are, or amendments are.
But don't we have that if we just added another line and you took out the duplications of when the offset was used twice? Couldn't you just, pardon?
Right. We also double bought Loan Fur by $1 million.
Right, and so I'm wondering if there could be a second line with like, it's been deduped.
But I think that's what we're asking for, the same thing.
Well, I don't think you need a whole new spreadsheet. I think we have listed here, it's just like, there could just be another line with a, duplicated, pay-fors and offsets.
One thing I could suggest is that I could break this into two components. One is amendments that are balanced with offsets, and one is amendments that are balanced with revenue, because that's where a lot of the duplication comes from. And so the first set would be, these are the amendments that were proposed with offsets to honor the hardware. And I hear you, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation with everybody and not just make assumptions. And then the other ones that are like, these were the ones that were proposed using the new contingency or the ongoing revenue, that if we take that out, we kind of have to figure out where, because they're all duplicated or triple counted or something like that. And that might give you a better sense of those things.
I like that. That sounds like a really helpful next step.
I'll still probably do it. So that I just need to think of it in terms of the universes, just for the way I think about it. All right. Okay. Great. Thank you for that. I think that was very helpful, Christian. Appreciate you talking through this with us. Okay, employment services. We have Amendment 11 around employment services. And I don't believe that there were any other specific amendments around that, but I don't want to miss something.
So this is the one that Commissioners Singleton and I proposed?
Yes.
So just as, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Singleton, I hadn't had a chance to tell you this in advance. There is one line that I'm going to be providing an offset for the DCHS that data collection apparently is really important to the DV community, the domestic violent community, and I can come back later, but it's been called to my attention that we might need a refinement.
A question on this amendment? Sorry. Is the 3.3 million, that is not a full restoration, correct? Is there some amount that's not? Oh, it's 415?
So the 3.3 would be a full restoration. We're 415,836 short of that. And that includes, the 3.3 would be full because in the chair's budget, there's almost 2 million of one-time only for employment services. So it comes back to the total cost. So yeah, I definitely want to acknowledge, we know we didn't get there on this one, and I wanted to show what was remaining to be funded, but Commissioner Bryn Edwards and I have talked that we don't think we can fully backfill this one, but we wanted to make sure folks could clearly see how much we were trying to get back into it.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at some of the questions. Were the questions, Sarah, Ryan, I'm going to ask you, are the questions that were posed for like conversations board, were those questions that board staff came up with as, okay, so thank you for that. So board staff wanted us to consider as possible discussion starting points, the questions like, based on the funding history, what is the role of county in employment services? In 5 months, will we cut this anyway when we have to do the state rebalance? How do you rank this in relation to shelter, rental assistance, or other prevention items? How does this relate to the renewal of the SHS measure? That's a big one. And if we can't buy back everything, how do we prioritize? The chiefs of staff.
So one of the things, just philosophically, why I'm enthusiastic about this is I do think it long-term creates some sustainability. It's not a one-time, we help somebody and you then are helping them again. It's like if we can help people actually create income and a path to employment, it actually over time, I think, reduces the county's obligations. So just from a philosophy, from my sense, from a philosophy of, I don't view this as like, hey, we're just like filling a gap. And then next year you have to fill the gap with that same person over again. Hopefully we are building sort of resilient employees that are going to be able to create their own income to pay for things versus it being a continuing an ongoing cost.
One of the things I appreciate about Commissioner Singleton's amendment is the fund shift, that not only is it a restoration, but we're taking it out of the land of one time only and putting it into ongoing. So I would question why, if there are state cuts, would this be on the table? I mean, if we pass this budget and adopt this amendment, then we're funding it with ongoing. We certainly could have an SHS fund reduction, but that is not dependent, I hope, on the state. We aren't budgeting the 25 million, are we, that we're asking for?
No, we haven't done that yet.
Okay.
We could, assuming.
Sure, but we're not.
Well, okay, so I will, so I think the risk is that there are certain buckets of money for homeless services or prevention or shelter, like at the state level, that the governor has put in her recommended budget, and that's what our homeless service department has budgeted from, assuming that those buckets get funded at the level that's in the governor's budget. What we've seen already, like for instance with community corrections, is that the legislature, the things that are coming out of the subcommittees are not at the level that the governor put in her budget. And so if that is also the case with the OHCS budget, for instance, then the dollars that we're assuming from the state for homeless services and other things are going to be lower, and we're going to have to do a rebalance in the fall to try to figure out how we're going to manage that. And that might mean straight cuts to some of those things that were in those budgets, or again, I think it's that priorities question of how are we then going to prioritize, things that may not be funded there. So that's why I think the priorities conversation is a good one.
So yes, and those funds from the state are generally SHAP, which we don't use a lot of shelter dollars because they're really freaking hard to use, to be honest. And EHA, which is emergency rent assistance, which goes through both DCHS and HSD. And I think we've already seen, the state will be in another eviction crisis. We're already seeing reductions in eviction prevention. I know that's not going to change their decision, but I think that that to me is a conversation we need to have, because there's other reductions in your budget, Chair, that reduce those because of our existing restrictions. So I think that's a bit of I don't want to cart before the horse this one.
I agree with that, because the level of unknowns that we have could paralyze our ability to move forward. We could be looking at a Medicaid cut that puts a whole lot of people into not having insurance, and that can throw off a whole lot of different things that so I get nervous. I hear that, and I have a fairly conservative approach to this budget, but I also feel like I don't know how we proceed if we're going to try to crystal ball every reduction that could come our way.
And on the SHS measure question for me, I don't think it has anything but positive effect to be able to tell a story about people moving into employment that allows them to pay rent. Is something that I think voters would expect us to be working on and to do. I think there's not a lot of space that the county plays in kind of economic opportunity, and workforce is one of them. So this for me is that kind of stepping stone for a lot of people. And a number of the folks who are being served through some of these programs are moving into apartments and paying their own rent, so they're not going to show up in our data. If we're not giving them subsidy, we're not then having to track them and do all the longer term components. So I think that this is creating housing opportunity that's outside of our public service system.
I'm co-sponsoring the amendment, so I'm all for it. I'll just say, it's like Cultivate Initiatives has a number of employment programs in East Portland. 2 days ago, I was at Stone Soup's coffee shop, where they have a whole training center for people getting their food handler's license and other certifications so that they can basically get jobs. And to me, this is like the ultimate empowerment for people who have been chronically unemployed or underemployed and often unhoused. So I think I agree with Commissioner Singleton that this is what I think voters expect us to do. And to me, it's way more sustainable than a sort of continuing to pay the rent, but not giving people an opportunity to figure out how to pay at least a portion of their rent.
Did I hear you correctly that you're going to be maybe reducing the proposed offset?
But I'm going to replace it.
Okay.
And I just want to, again, I know I already introduced this amendment, but I want to appreciate Commissioner Moyer and DCHS. This is where you see the $992,000 that is proposed as a reduction to the HMIT program. And this is why we had that conversation. So I just think it's really important to note that here, that the other amendment now backfills that reduction with that general fund and then Medicaid match. Just to make it more fun.
I love a good spreadsheet challenge.
I'm glad you can be positive. Like you are like always like finding that silver lining. I love it.
I got spreadsheets for you.
Yeah. Okay, anything else on the employment services? I think we have about 18 minutes left. So the last one was around amendments 12 and 13, around HR and CIU. And I will note that the CIU, this was one of the CO's office proposals for finding additional revenue.
I captured those savings first. I just want to make that very clear.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I proposed this amendment before they found the exact same money.
No, you absolutely did. I just think it was there was a internal conversation about, is this something people can live with? So, and it was, I think we came out to a place where it's like, yes, let's realize those dollars. So thank you for that. Okay.
Wait, sorry, I'm not fully tracking where that was. So this is
12.
the amendment 12, okay.
HR and 13.
Oh,
CIU of HR.
yes, so sorry, 13 for that one specifically. Although, is it a little bit different?
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little different, okay. Because I think the dollars were a little different. Okay.
So do we have those savings? Is that part of our,
So that is something that I could ask Commissioner Moyer if there's a few of these. I think there's 3 now, if I'm tracking. Who knows? They're all blending together. That really you're proposing offsets, right? So the number 12 doesn't have expenditure increase associated with it.
No, I do have some unfunded ones as well. The dollar figures are not exactly the same.
Would you like me to move those into the blue column or leave them here or associate them with some of your other amendments?
Let me get back to you.
So many choices.
So I have a question about something that was put on the table yesterday in the COO's document. There is, do you have that handy? Page 5. The possible cuts to staff assistant. Is that paid, is that SHS dollars?
Those are SHS. I think one is general fund and one is SHS. Can someone behind me nod their head?
It says there's just one of them, though. It doesn't.
The one on this list, I believe.
I'm sorry, the one at the, this one up here. It looks like it's just one position. It's going from 5 to 4.
But I said both general fund and SHS. General fund. That is general fund.
Okay, so I'll type this up, but I'm going to offer an amendment to, if my co-sponsor is okay with this, to substitute that position as an offset to the DCHS, I'm sorry, the DCHS data and evaluation. This is the domestic violence. So it makes,
Yep.
it's 7,000 short, but
so let's chat
Okay, we
offline
can-
because I used that cut for something else. That is in the
did you put
COO.
that, did you put that on the table?
I used it before this came out. I
Okay.
proposed a reduction to
I'll
HR,
have another one.
but let's chat.
Okay. So that's conceptual.
There will be so much chatting. All right.
So this is, I'm just going to say, it would be useful because I did ask yesterday whether any of the things in here had already been used or this was just a,
So this is our next step, is what Jeff and I were going to do is go through this document, compare it to this document. I just ran out of daylight yesterday.
And I will say, I didn't take particular positions, so mine's just a dollar amount, so it might be different, but it was essentially one HRS FTE.
Did anybody use the program supervisor on page 3? I mean, this is the thing that's hard about it, because it's like, are these new, or they'd already been discovered? Because they don't really tell you where it is in the.
That's why I needed just a good solid hour to go through it. I mean, I have a general sense of some of them, but I want to triple check because, again, the budget needs to be balanced and we don't want to be double counting.
I have a question related to proposals that discuss vacancies.
Okay.
I don't know how the mechanics of that work. How do we know what vacancy savings historically is? How would you effectuate a budget amendment that uses vacancies? That's one I'm trying to like wrap my head around, because I don't know how much that is. And like, have we overdone vacancies? Do we rely on vacancies for other things, which I think is my understanding? And if we take vacancy savings, are we then not having some funds that we planned or we have historically used for different purposes? I just can't wrap my head around the vacancy conversation. And then I guess my third question related to that is, have we ever, I don't know if Mount Loomis County has ever done it, but like sometimes in the private sector, you stagger hiring so that you can intentionally have like 1 quarter or 2 quarter savings on some of that. And have we ever done that? Prioritized hiring, or even just been realistic about like, we can't hire this many deputies, although that's a bad example because the overtime, something that doesn't have overtime.
Commissioner Moyer, can I just say, I have an amendment that I was going to put on the table specifically relating to that. And I talked to wanting to do it in a way that also acknowledging some positions need to be filled right away. So it's not like all vacancies wouldn't be, but it's a staggered, some positions, like some percentage of them wouldn't be, say, hired till the end of Q1. Knowing that's probably going to happen anyway, and sort of capturing those, their one-time savings. I mean, this is what we used to do all the time with my former employer. It was like, you want capturing some one-time savings because everybody doesn't hire people on July 1, but also wanting to be thoughtful that there are some positions that, say, if the commission and the approved budget, like, yes, we're going to add that, or we're going to fill that vacancy. We've decided that some of them need to be filled on July 1. So I'm going to have an amendment that I need to get it costed out.
And one thing I will add to it, we are currently, and this is something we didn't talk about yesterday, Commissioner, so sorry that I'm surprising you with this. I thought about it as I was driving home. One of the things that we don't do is we don't budget for when people retire. And when people retire, it can be there can be some pretty significant payouts. And so that's kind of how we've used in some of these instances. When you have an employee who's been here for a very long time, they're retiring, their vacation payout is X amount of dollars, which we have to do by law. And then you're hiring either, a couple months later, or you're hiring kind of at that newer level. So that's kind of some of that flexibility that you were talking about that we've used. In some instances, I use the example in my office where I have an employee who is a 20-year county employee who's now in an on-call position, who fills one of my vacant positions, basically, who does not want to be a full-time employee. So on paper, it looks like that employee's not there's no one in that position, but in order to get the work done, you kind of have this workaround. So I think that's part of the work in those vacancy sheets that you all received yesterday, I believe. It showed whether or not they were being, if the position was being filled in an alternative way. And so I think those are some of the things that we just want to keep in mind as we're having these conversations, because what we don't want to do is scoop up every penny so that then the departments are then in these situations where maybe they're delaying hiring, or maybe they're delaying hiring someone who's experienced because they don't think they can afford them. And so like also providing them some of that flexibility, I think, is really important. I only play an HR person on TV. I know there are HR people and very experienced managers who will have a much better conversation than I can have with you about that. But that's been kind of some of those top line experiences that I've seen at the county.
And
So I'm just, since you're commenting on what I might be offering, I mean, in general, best practice for a large organization would be for us to understand what our long-term liabilities would be versus having an ad hoc system. So I appreciate that's how we've done it, but we really should understand what our long-term liabilities are for our payouts versus relying on vacancy savings just as a best practice. I'm not an HR professional either, but I mean, it allows us, we should be taking a look at that, like what are our costs that we have sitting on the books that, it could be like all of a sudden a whole bunch of people retire and like we don't have the vacancy savings. So I would just hope that that would be like an HR systems that we're improving versus relying on. I mean, again, I don't think a department should have to figure out how to pay for somebody retiring who has a lot of, a big payout coming, because that doesn't really seem fair to like that particular department, especially the smaller the department, the harder it is. And you may not have any vacancies to pay for it. So maybe this is the call to like us revolutionizing revolving our systems.
Yeah, and I think that's an important conversation, and that does, like, those types of things increase our costs and our ongoing costs. And predicting people's behavior is one of the hardest parts, especially like when we're doing labor costing, because people will behave differently. Like some people might decide to go on that 3-month vacation before they retire 2 years before. And so those are some of those hard predictors, but I think over time we can figure out what that looks like and build a better mousetrap for that.
So one of the things I wanted to point out are all the folks in this room. So I requested that the department directors or department leadership be in this room, and I look around and I really appreciate everybody taking the time to be here today as we have these conversations, because what I wanted to make sure is that if there were specific questions that came up around a proposed cut or a proposed, and we had questions about what's the potential impact of that, that we had the right people in the room to be able to help answer this and help us think through like some of these decisions that we're making. I also think that, thank you, Christian, for playing an HR person for the county. I do think that it would be great to have someone from the CO's office, though, maybe talk a little bit more about the county-wide philosophy on how we do manage these things. Just to make sure that there's a shared understanding.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. And so if somebody wants to come brief me afterwards, looks like I might be getting that. But what I hear is like more of an ad hoc system, and Multnomah County is a $4 billion enterprise, and it seems like that's something that we should have a handle on, what our long-term liabilities are, and not depending on having vacancies pay for it. And it's hard for me to ask, I'm just going to respond to your question about like, what do we ask people? The problem is it's hard for me without knowing, are things already paid for? Like, sort of, why bother even asking for something if it's already being used? So that's what I need. And I know you already said you're going to get it. So
yeah, that's the plan.
I'm just kind of responding to it. It's hard for me to ask for that. But I am going to, because it sounds like the program supervisor on page 3 hasn't the vacancy hasn't been used by somebody else. So I would suggesting that it's not a complete pay for the position in program offer 25160 that I'm going to be removing.
And I think we will have, as Christian said, she and her team need like a good hour or so to just dig in and to confirm that. So we will, until we hear, I mean, I appreciate you putting your placeholder on.
Because the 569,000 is now like almost zero. Just saying.
And the reduction is 1.5 FTE, so it may be worth a question to the department about the differential cost.
Okay, so we're getting close to time. Are there any amendments? Even though we've been talking about amendments all afternoon. Any amendments? All right.
One is a correction to a previous amendment that Commissioner Jones-Dixon and I brought forward related to Sun Schools. So it's not a new amendment, it's a change. It had to do with the Successful Families Program, which has actually already been integrated into Sun. And so instead of restoring that in its former version, it is looking to restore some of the resources, but keeping it within that Sun framework. So it's just a correction to a previous.
Do you have the number by any chance of that previous amendment?
That's a great question. No, I don't. And then I don't know how much revenue this creates because I could not get an answer, but I'm going to move forward with this amendment anyway, which is to freeze county-sponsored or county-funded sponsorships out of departments and offices for fiscal year 2026. But this exempts employee events. So this is external sponsorships for organizational events.
So would that be something like, I can think of things that would fall into two buckets. One would be the galas, which I think is what you're getting at.
That is what I'm getting at.
There would be also things like, there's a community event, and I mean, I love showing up and seeing the library at, say, the NAMI Walk, where the library or the behavioral health division, I don't know if they paid to have a table or a booth, but is it just the former, not the latter?
It is meant to be the former, not the latter. So I may need
We might need a little.
to provide additional language.
I always try and go find the county people at those community events because elections, the libraries, I mean, it's a really important way. I think county services sometimes show up, or for example, the NAMI Walk, having the behavioral health division there.
Yeah, and I would like to understand the scope as well, because like there are some sponsorships, for instance, the Northwest Public Employees Diversity Conference that the county sponsors, which is like we have been sponsoring that. We were one of the founding organizations for that conference. And I think, you know, we're one of the, I don't know what the word is like our contribution to that is really part of what makes it possible for that conference to happen. So I am curious if there's what you had in mind in terms of those kinds of events.
Like tables at galas and purchasing something which is for fundraising for an organization in which we probably all already fund.
Okay. I'm going to ask Jenny Madcourt, is that like a budget amendment or is that a policy that the board could pass?
So it's a complicated question, but thank you.
Oh, your mic.
Donna, sorry about that. Thank you for the question. The
the chair, through our administrative procedures, has a financial procedure that allows for sponsorships when certain criteria are met. And so that is created in the chair's role as the chief executive officer of the county. So I think that the board could have, through the budget process, and of course, this is an allocation document, not creating additional administrative rules for, throughout the county process, but the board could state, excuse me?
Sometimes budget amendments also include policy.
Well, they may include policy statements, that's true, but we don't use the board allocation document to override existing policies. And we can talk about it more, but I think that, I think we could probably refine this amendment, first of all, to meet the goals that you want, as you all were discussing. But then also, certainly this board could make a commitment about non-departmental funds coming out of commission offices and how those funds will be spent. Pushing it down through the county, though, those would be individual spends by each department. So I think we'd really have to put our pencils to paper to see how we could refine it enough to meet that goal. But certainly, I think we can get partway there, at least in the budget document. And then also urge additional action either by the board or by the chair to take action in the next coming fiscal year to identify either legislative or policy action that would better meet the needs of the board.
Thank you. Okay, and so amendments, got it. And then Commissioner Jones-Dixon, you had an amendment?
Yeah, just have three amendments, two of which I'm just amending an amendment that I proposed last week or the week before. The amendments are to reflect the offsets that we're recommending, and both are connected to the homeless services programming in East County. And then the third amendment is, here's associated with the 90-day pause on the development of the Cook Plaza, the East County Homeless Resource Center. Our office is going to be convening the East County leadership and electeds and a handful of CBOs to come up with to look at additional options or other options. So we would like to ensure that those resources stay out in East County, the resources that have been set aside for Cook Plaza. And this amendment reflects, or one of those amendments reflect that.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then I have, were there any other amendments? Sorry.
Actually, I'm sorry. That amendment number 3 is reflective of retaining, bringing back the East County Homeless Services position. I think that's what that amendment is there that I just handed out.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yes.
So I just want to flag two things. I'm going to have a replacement pay for the MCAS, because I spent the opioid money twice, and so I'm going to leave the opioid money. I think it's a better match with the treatment court and civil commitment piece. And then, I'm going to have 2 offsets, and I'll send this around as soon as I can figure out how to take the watermark off it, that are pay-fors that came out of the COO's document. As soon as I get the watermark off, I'll send it around. And then the second piece is, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to ask to have it costed out, but I want to make sure that I set the parameters correctly, which is this phased vacancy filling. So it's not eliminating vacancies, and it's also not across the board, because that's not strategic. Some positions need to be hired right away. So, but I want to cost that out, but I want people to know it's coming. And we also need to do, like, what are the vacancies that are left after all the processes that are done? So that, hopefully I'll have that tomorrow to put on the table, but it will be informed by staff.
Great. So I have budget notes. So, and Sarah is passing them out. So there's a few different ones. Okay, so this, so the first one, this one, right, is with D2?
Is with D2.
Yeah, so the first one is also, it didn't get added to this, but is also, it is done in partnership with Commissioner Singleton, and it's rental assistance backbone analysis. I will not read out the entire thing because there will be, everybody has paper in front of them, but basically it's looking at as the dollars for rental assistance has gone down. We heard from DCHS earlier that, we're really getting for rental assistance, moving more towards what it looked like pre-COVID. So making sure that the backbone staffing is also being decreased in a way that reflects the fewer dollars that are going out into the community to make sure that we are right-sizing that investment as well. The second one is just something that I had planned to do when my budget was released, just around making sure that this board has line of sight into how the hiring is going with the sheriff's office for the resources that have been put in my budget for the human resources positions, and just checking in how those filling of those vacancies is going. So asking for an update to the board in early 26 on that. Oh, it's page 2. Look at page, oh, it's on the back. It's on the back of the double-sided. We're trying to save trees with all the printing that's happening these days. The next one is capital projects plans. So this is requesting that the Department of County Management and the Chief Operating Office create a comprehensive plan that includes tracking all capital projects together, clarifying equity impacts of ongoing projects, improving our prioritization process, and working across all projects to better identify and engage external funding sources. The work should clearly identify where the board responsibilities and engagement will take place, and have this brought back to the board in February of 26. Then school-based mental health quality improvement strategy. So I think, this is, again, part of the making sure that this program has stable funding sources so that it can continue, especially when we're seeing less investment from external partners for this type of program. Is asking the Health Department's Behavioral Health Division to transmit a plan to the Board of County Commissioners for where mental health consultants will be placed based on the department's local health and risk data, student health surveys, community current school-based mental health encounter data, district contracts and information. Transmit a plan to the board for a financial sustainable school-based mental health program model. Provide quarterly written reports to the Board of County Commissioners that include qualitative and quantitative metrics on outcomes related to the impact of the program. And by the end of March 2026, so in time for our next budget cycle, brief the Board of County Commissioners on the initial outcomes from the program's effort to meet previously stated goals. And then the second to last one that I have is around outreach services for people experiencing homelessness, and this follows the conversations that we have been having, and I want to appreciate Commissioner Singleton for your work in this area as well, but asking the Chief Operating Officer to request a briefing to the board in January of 26 to provide an update on the work to look at aligning outreach services. I really simplified that one. And then the last one was one that was introduced with Commissioner Moyer yesterday, so that's just a repeat of that. So those are the budget notes.
So I had a question, this is, I think, for Jenny Madcore. So in the past, we were told to write budget notes as if we're directing the chair to do something, or asking the chair to do something. So I'm just wondering, a budget note from the chair is like the chair asking herself to do something? Is that? It just confused me before, so I'm just.
Yeah, so we would be working with all of you on the budget notes to get the language in line with our various authorities, and I'm already in contact with many of your staff and with Christian to help write and rewrite those. These are being written very quickly, so we work to get them right.
Yeah, we will take any friendly amendments to the language but I will also say, like, for me, one of the things I really like about budget notes is that they are on our public board, they're on our public website, the public can see them, and it is a good way to keep track of the things that this board is expecting to be reported back on, and that in a way to make sure that that work is happening. So that's, for me, that's really helpful to have that, have that transparency into some of this.
Right. I kind of philosophically see it, why that would be for the case for us. I mean, hopefully we'll have like a work plan for this next year that we would seal that on as well. But I also think that there would be things from the departments, which would be, my guess is like the chair's budget notes that would be included. It just seems we should have a better understanding of how the process works, because it seems if we're asking the chair to do something or the commission through a budget note asking them to do something, and then it seems odd to have the chair asking herself to do something.
Well, the meeting right now is of the budget committee, and I know you're wearing different hats right now, even though we can't see them. So you're the budget committee. You are also the Multnomah County Board of County Commissioners. And so after this budget is approved, you'll all put on your county hats again. And so although it is a bit awkward, that's one of the distinctions that makes it a little different.
So before we adjourn, does anybody else have any other things? One of the things that I had offered a budget note on the, not a budget note, an amendment on the Office of Commission Services. So I'm interested if people have any questions of getting them answered sooner rather than later. Not right now, but just because when we lay things on the table, there's not always a discussion about the topic. So I'm just laying it out there that if people have questions or anything.
And I do, and I had a change.
Tonight, when's it on the agenda? I'll prepare for it.
I will take you up on that, because I did have a conversation with Commissioner Moyer, because I think you guys did that one together. So I did have a conversation with Commissioner Moyer about it. I think that what I'm interested in is really finding out what's the purpose of this, because I actually, in terms of like the angle for the board, like how this change serves the board and what's the ultimate goal there, because I actually see as like moving this office under the CO's office is actually like taking it more out of the realm of the commission and the elected offices. And because the COO reports to the chair, not to the board. So I'm trying, so we had a conversation about what might it best, like where is the best place for this to live? So happy to continue to engage in conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would just say one thing, just my other experiences I've had, that having a shared service sitting actually in another political office feels less like it's a shared service versus in a more neutral platform.
And if I may, board, I would just point out for the commissioner's knowledge that the clerk's office is not currently in the code. And another thing that the board could do would be to put the clerk's office in the code into non-departmental, which might meet your need there. So just further conversation about other tools that may be available to get to what you're looking for.
So if it's not in code, what does that imply?
Yeah, not everything is in the code, but we do have Chapter 25 of the county code that lists several of the offices. The county attorney's office is there, sustainability is there, and those are the legislated offices. And then in our budget process, we also have offices that appear for the purposes of having the bucket to be funded. So they have program offers, but they're not necessarily in the code.
So what does it mean by not being listed? I mean, what's the implication of that? And we can take this offline.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger question. There's not actually a legal implication as much, but the issue that I was hearing you just say is that you were thinking that the fact that the board clerk is sort of under the elected office of the chair, that might not create the transparency or the access for the rest of the board. And one tool to address that would be to say, okay, we're going to affirmatively say in the code, and that would be a Multnomah County board action by an ordinance, to create the office of the board clerk as a non-departmental unit. And then it would be in chapter 25 of the code.
Right. It's a code, not a charter.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
so that, I mean, the commission could
So,
do that.
and we could do that outside of the budget process as well.
I'm just curious, which would be a clarifying question. So all the offices that are established as non-D offices, is the intention that they work on behalf of the whole board? Because that has not been my experience.
I'm not sure that I understand your question, and I would speak for the county attorney's office, which is to say that we work for the county, and as a representative of the county, you are just as important as a client representative as anybody else. And I think I can speak for at least some of my colleagues, emergency management being one of them, that's typically the way that it works. It's, that we're working for the county and for the betterment of the county and the services that we provide. Many of those Chapter 25 offices are really internal partners.
Yeah, I mean more like who they report to, who they need permission to represent the county, their positions they take publicly. And I'm actually not talking about your office. My concern is that may not be a solution to what we're looking for if in practice those offices don't engage with the commission as if they are in service of the whole committee. My motivation in supporting and signing on to Commissioner Brenda Edwards is that there are functions that need to serve the commission as a whole and be responsive to the commission. The commission should collectively hire, the commission should agree upon how the work is done, and they not be, even though the presiding officer has a role, they're not exclusive to the service of the executive and the chair, but they are in service toward the commission. I think there are like equivalent examples. The city of Portland has some offices that are really specifically not under the mayor, but the council as an entity. And at least my motivation related to co-sponsoring is wanting that distinction for certain important roles that relate to how this commission functions.
Yeah, I think the board clerk is absolutely one that is in service to the entire board, right? Like that is it. And that's why I had some discomfort with moving it under the CO's office, because I felt like that just takes it into administration, which is not in service to the entire board. I think it reports up through my office because of just being the presiding officer to this. I think Jenny, I appreciate the conversation, because I think that we could use language in code to clarify the role and the purpose for the board clerk and how it serves the entire board, and formalize that, because I don't think I even realized it wasn't in our code, right? So I think that that's an opportunity for us.
But I'll just say the COO's office or any other office is not actually a political office. And I mean, there's just a difference.
Sarah, can you keep this on the agenda so that we actually have time to prep for it so we can all participate in the discussion? Thanks.
She's got it. Okay, thank you. All right, so appreciate the conversation on this. Thanks for asking for feedback on that. So we will go ahead and wrap up this session. That concludes today's budget work session. Our next meeting will be our regular board meeting scheduled for tomorrow, Tuesday, June 5th at 9:30. Woo! So there being no further business, we are adjourned.